a ser bien cabrón. Poco a poco fue creciendo ese chavalón. Mi madre con su respeto, ella me educó. Los consejos de mi padre siempre llevo yo. Él fue quien me ha enseñado a ser verdadero. Y dijo, pórtate mal con quien son culero. Y desde ese momento mi vida cambió. Y ahora véanme bien loco y bien tumbado. Vacas verdes es en lo que yo siempre pienso. Pues pa' obtenerla solo existe el esfuerzo. Muchos golpes de la vida me han tocado. A partir de ahí ya no volví a ser yo. Y puro, Justin Morales viejo. Y vámonos para arriba. Somos JK Music. Mi hermano que en paz descanse siempre fue un chingón. Yo lo llevo en la mente y en el corazón. Carnal Brandon tatuado hasta el cuello. Gracias por todo, carnales, un abrazo. Puro Morales en la sangre llevo yo. Orgulloso de estar en la familia que estoy. Pa' mi clica un saludo, siempre me verán. Diferente madre, pero aquí yo soy carnal. Los reales yo los cuento con los dedos de mis manos. Algunos son solo amigos y otros como hermanos. ¿Dónde están los que decían que nada lograría? Pues empieza desde cero para adelante todos los días.
Hey guys, before we get started, quick shout out, Ceci Escano, our sister from Riverside. Thank you once again, Ceci, for watching. You're our sister. We got San Diego SO legend Roger Demchok once again. And Ceci, we have you here once again. And we have Dim to Janice, Batman. I understand you talked to Benny today or yesterday. You guys had a wonderful conversation. We're looking forward to having you on one of our episodes, Jim, in the near future. And let me see. Roger is saying hi to Jim and to Ceci. And Jim, hola, Roger. And we have a San Diego PD, Team 4 legend. We got Team 4 legend, Christopher Kilby. Guys, with that said, let's get started. We have no shout-outs today. Benny, it's all yours. But before we get started, Jay, how was your 4th of July?
I was great. First, hello to everyone and everyone who's on the chat. Happy, I get belated 4th of July. It was good. You know, anytime I'm able to spend it with my kids, it's a great holiday for sure.
Good, good. Benny, how was your 4th of July, Benny?
It was good. It was hot. We had nothing planned. We every year we have get-togethers, barbecues. We didn't do any of that. It was way too hot. It was over 110 degrees. It was just blowing hot air. So we just stayed indoors.
You didn't go see any fireworks in anywhere?
No. I mean,
not this year, huh?
Just too hot, you know.
Yeah. What about you, Big Sean? You're close to the Capitol, man. Did you get a chance? Actually, the CIA trains right behind you. Did they fire up any fireworks?
Earlier in the day, earlier in the day, they had some training going on. But no, just like Benny, when this week when Benny said it was too hot to barbecue, I thought about it for about 15 seconds. Went outside, looked at the barbecue, and said, "Nah, it's too damn hot. I'm going inside." I just cooked inside. Yeah,
wow,
it was too hot, man. It was too hot.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you, as we get older, the hot weather bothers us, the cold weather, everything bothers us. But with that said, Benny, it's all yours, brother. Go ahead and we're ready. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean. Take it away, Sean.
Okay, first question to Jay. So, Jay, how was your relationship with your father-in-law, a law enforcement officer, and tell us about that family dynamic?
Yes, that's a good question. So many of those people don't know that my father-in-law was a 28-year veteran of law enforcement officer in Chicago. He was a Chicago police officer. For the most part, early on, I didn't have a relationship because I think I felt like guilty because I knew what I was doing, and my wife, she took the route of lying to, her parents about me because she didn't want them to get the wrong impression, and again, it was to protect them, right? Eventually, basically, we came up with this lie, and once I was living in Mexico, that my family had made a lot of money off of being ranchers and stuff like that. Who knows what we made up, my wife, just to protect them. And it took some time for him to actually even uh, kind of even have conversations with me. But over the time, I feel like he started to like get to know me through just you know being around the rest of the family, and I think he took a chance. But it was hard because when I guess people like to say when the shit hit the fan, like literally, and he was shocked and disappointed for sure, and he literally probably didn't say a word to me for 5 years. He's always been like reserved. He's one of those officers that you could imagine that sticks to himself. He went to work. He was and he was real prideful of his job and what he did. Um, he actually retired. He retired from his first job at 36, and then he became a police officer. So he's a hard worker. And he was very he was very prideful, and he loved his kids very much, and he taught me a lot. He taught me how to actually be a better father to my daughters and understand that our daughters are not always going to make the decisions that we want for them. And he showed me the compassion and patience, and how he always put his daughters first no matter what, even with being in a situation like with someone like me and some of her past relationships. I'm sure it was embarrassing to him, him wearing that badge, and you could imagine, some of the stuff that was said, behind his back. And he was someone who, prided himself in being a law enforcement officer and do the right thing every day. And then, for his daughter to end up with me, it kind of like started tainting, I guess, his reputation a little bit. But again, my wife comes, her whole family's in law enforcement, in different cities and in Chicago especially. So, yeah, it wasn't easy, but eventually it was my sons who basically one day figured out that he wouldn't speak to me. And from my understanding, my son asked asked his grandpa, like, "Hey, grandpa, how come you never visit my dad?" And I guess he felt like, he felt bad. And I remember my wife said, my dad wants to come visit you. And that was a big moment for me. I felt bad to having to see him, walk through those doors to come see me. As a man, I felt like, embarrassed and ashamed for sure. But he came and talked to me like a man, and basically said, "Look, I I'm disappointed in some of the stuff that we've been through," because he was affected by it as well. But ultimately, I feel like I gained his respect by the man that I was and who I have been as a husband, as a father. I think that's what always like mattered to him most. So yeah, we don't have the best relationship. Obviously, I'm not around my in-laws like that, but he's a good man, and I learn from him when I am around him. Uh, I feel like he's forgiven me? I'm not sure. I think now that I work with a law enforcement officer, I kind of see and I understand why, right? For someone who's been law abiding, who worked his butt off to get everything he had, and to raise his family, and then to have me just be on the other side of it, who it's even hard, I think, for him. Especially
Jay,
what we've been through.
go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, working in Chicago, dude, is no joke. I mean, you look what's going on there today. Yeah, the lawlessness up there. But yeah, and surviving all that. So yeah, give him some time. He'll come around. Trust me.
Hey, Jay, what did he retire as? A sergeant, lieutenant, detective, officer?
So
did he ever talk to you about any specialized units that he worked? Did he work internal affairs? Did he work narcotics? Did he ever talk about that?
I think this is going to say everything about him. he was one that was comfortable with doing his job as an officer.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
right? You guys know that he was comfortable doing
Yeah.
his job. He wasn't gonna, he came on the force older, and that's who he is. He's, you know, he loves spending time with his family. He's an amazing grandfather, amazing father, and for the most part, what I've known or what I've heard is that he stood as an officer for, most of the time, in the force. By I guess he chose to that route. And I want to say, like, I think a part of me feels like I can't have a bad relationship with someone in my life, if that makes any sense. Because I think
Yeah.
the individual, the man that I am, um, with anyone, but I do feel like I do, I could understand. I don't push too hard, but we've never actually spoken about like stories. Like, you guys know more about me than he was, because he actually is one of those person that doesn't want to know. There's been times where he's like heard, conversations about different stuff, if it was about our book or something like that, and he'd be like, what? So he's never read my wife's book. He, it's hard, he's a father at the end of the day, right? um but yeah, I think we have a great relationship, basically because it's not a lot, right? It's not a lot, but like I said, he's opened up his home to me, and I feel like he accepted me even under these circumstances, eventually. And that means a lot to me. uh,
I was just going to say, Roger just sent out a message saying, hopefully you'll see this. Maybe one day he will.
um Hopefully, I mean, I don't know, he cares about this kind of stuff. um I've tried. He's one of those. He's also, it's weird because he's this loving father, but he doesn't like the interaction of having like deep rooted heart to heart conversations, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
So it's always been hard. I had these like certain instances where I wanted to be like, hold on, this, I have to tell you this, and he would be like, no, 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 like, it's like, I get it, like, leave me alone, right? Like, so he's one of those, like, I guess, probably like your old school law enforcement officer that's more of like, it's okay, right? Let's, have a beer and move on instead
Mhm.
of talking it out. So yeah, it's tricky. But my brother's father-in-law, he was actually narcotics in the narcotics task force and in the gang task force in the neighborhood I grew up in. So that was a little bit different, because
Mm.
he knew us since, we were kids, since we were babies, basically. Same district until he retired. I think he did over 30 years. Um, he was one of the officers that actually would raid our houses, that we actually lived in growing up. So um, that was also like this unique
Yeah.
relationship there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just got to give it some time. Just give it some time, Jay. Things are going to get better. So let's get into another subject here. Let's talk about Chapo again a little bit. It kind of keep it short on this one because we already said some stuff about him, your interactions with him when you first met him. But was he a complex man to work with? I mean, did he trust people? Did he trust you and your brother after everything settled down?
Absolutely, he trusted us. There's a few different ways of trusting, but he trusted us. But when it comes to business, it's the business. He could trust you all you want, but at the end of the day, he wants what's his, and a friend could turn into enemy, in a blink of an eye, with one bad phone call. Because business is business. So, um, in order for us to stay in his good graces, right, it was about the business, right? We had to keep doing our part.
So, Jay, at what point did you? I mean, after everything happened, at what point did you decide to turn yourself in, and why?
Mm. So I try to explain this all the time. There's not one thing. It was a bunch of things that were, basically building. I do believe that I was maturing. I started off at a young age. I was maturing. I was, uh, my family was evolving. Like, right. My relationship. I felt like I was maturing in so many ways, and I had many instances in that life where I was able to sit down and be like, wow, um, foresight, for sure. And I think because I'm a believer in Christ, I feel like something just like that light that's always in there kind of really, really turned on. And I think it was over prayers and, stuff that I have gone through that I feel like, um, I, I remember correctly, I was always like looking for solutions for problems or always brainstorming.
Mhm.
And um, what people don't realize is that at that point where we're at, it's like I think I was more scared. And I've said this a few times and people could get offended, but I was more scared of what I was going to become than what I was. And what I was going to become, what my brother and I foreseen us becoming was really someone that we weren't at all. Like that we're going to, be kind of put in a situation where we're going to have to make choices and decisions that didn't align with, who we were. And I felt like that weighed on me. And I remember, praying to God, just like, give me answers. Like, I didn't want to, like, I felt like I was already far enough away, but I felt like I could also still hear his voice, right? That I was still in that, still close enough to come back and I explained that I had a spiritual epiphany one night, and I woke up in the middle of the night with this plan in my mind of how I was going to change my life. And for the most part, it was something unthinkable, and it was like the only way I could explain it is like me trying to, coming up with an invention that that was going to work, I guess. That was unbelievable, and I felt like I was guided by Christ, and and until he took away the fear, he took away, and there's fears of different kinds, and besides, being fear of like death or or physical harm, there's fear of like the unknown, right? A fear of like losing your family or anything. You might might not make it home to dinner. You're fearful of what your wife is gonna say, right? You just multiply that by by a lot, and so I think all that pressure, I think um
It
certainly
was it was just a combination of everything, right?
yes,
Yeah.
but yeah, and again, I felt like once that idea was kind of like it was filled in my mind and in my heart, I felt like there was no turning back. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and I just disregarded anything that negative that could have happened to me, or and I just went with it.
Yeah.
I felt like I followed my heart, and thank God that I did. Right?
Yeah. Well, Jay, John, we got to go into the next evolution of your life after you turn yourself in. Go ahead, Sean.
So Jay, now you're in custody for the first time. Where were you, and how were you feeling about it? And tell us about the booking process and your first night in custody in a cell. And were you housed by yourself?
It's funny. I hear you ask that question. I'm like, I bet you could tell me a little bit more about that process than I could. Oh man. Wow. I feel like I could relive those moments, as if it just happened to me yesterday for sure.
And Jay, we're talking about the first time you
Your
got
first time that you got popped.
No,
The
yeah,
first
that's
time that
why.
you went in. Yeah.
That was my first time.
Yeah.
So, I think that it's weird because it's hard when I explain it. It's like me understanding what was happening, me understanding what was gonna, what I just did. But when I first felt those like handcuffs on my wrist, it was like a big awakening for me. I remember the first time I felt, they put the box, the black box on me. I was like, hold on, hold on. This stuff I see on TV, right? Because I never been in those situations, but um, I think the reality hit was like the first night, uh, getting put in the shoe. Um, going through the whole process, it was like, of course it's uncomfortable, and I don't even think I was present. I was just like kind of going with the routine, and obviously, um, where you can imagine what type of caravan we had, right? And what type of commotion it was. So when we got the first night, they put us in a county jail, and all the county guards that were there, they were already, they were, I feel like they were giving us special treatment where like they knew that it was, they had no idea who we were, but they knew it was someone important just because, there's 40, 50 that, government agents, coming to bring you. But it was hard because you go from, being, I guess, what we thought was on top of the world one day to, in a few hours, being locked in a shoe. And my brother was separated. And it was, one of the filthiest places I think I've ever been to, that shoe, right? And it was like, the county they gave was like rip orange socks with the, shower shoes. The whole uniforms were just ripped, just all torn apart. And it was in the middle of the winter. So I remember that those doors locking behind me. I was like, it was a old white light in the room, and the light doesn't shut off. I do remember for that second, like thinking, like, what the fuck did I do? Like I put
AJ, what jail was it? Was it the one municipal jail there in Chicago, or where was it at?
So that's the they took me to this county jail in Kenosha. It's Kenosha County Jail.
Where's that? Where's Kenosha County?
It's in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
It's in Wisconsin. And then, a day later, they took me to MCC Chicago, and that was just a whole different process. But once, I got into that segregated unit, that was hard because that was like, it just changed. Like, the BOP has, they know exactly how to deal with you. We had a 3-man hold. I'm sure whoever's in corrections probably knows a 3-man hold is a lieutenant, 2 COs for each of us. That's the only time they can move you or basically do anything for you, right? No one could open your door. Like, it's like your truck is open just, for lunch or whatever the case is. And it's, it's freezing in the shoe. It was like, I want to say there's icicles on the walls and, that door, like I didn't know the process. I still remember, being handcuffed, you're handcuffed behind your back and they tell you to come in the shoe, in your room, in the cell. And they close the door and they open the truck, right? And they're looking at me. I'm looking at them. And they're like, come on, man. I don't know the process. I didn't know I had to, crouch down and so they could take the handcuffs off. So all that was like a learning process. Yeah, but I think I remember
it was a rude awakening, huh?
Absolutely. I remember it was like the first hour. I'm staring at that white wall, just like nothing but dirt. Like it's steel, like cement floors, steel toilet, and just steel bed. Like there's nothing there. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, this is prison? Like, what am I gonna do? Like, like just it was terrifying. And I remember thinking, like, wow, I wonder if they would have done this to me when I was younger. Would I have like I know I would have never, taken this route. That's what I was saying, that at that time.
Hey Jay, when you turned yourself in, you said they took you to Kenosha in Wisconsin. Did you turn yourself in Wisconsin, or did you turn yourself in Chicago?
No, I turned myself in Mexico.
In Mexico.
Yeah, that was a whole different like process. And not a easy one at that, but
that's a different show, huh?
That was a different. I guess that's a different question. We'd have to go into some time with that, but yeah, I turned myself into Mexico, and just to share a little bit, like I didn't when I basically I don't know what you call it, turn myself in, but I went and hung out with the agents right in Mexico, and I basically wasn't under arrest, so for the most part we were like like talking and until we actually touched down in Dallas for the first time. But once I touched that U.S. floor, I remember I had to use a restroom. I'm like, man, I have to use a restroom. I came down off it was a jet. We came down off the jet, and the minute I stepped into that U.S. soil. I remember they're like, turn around, and I was like, huh? He like, turn around, put your hand behind your back, and they read me my rights. I was like, oh shit, and it got real. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah.
Perhaps we can do a show just on that, Jay. So because that's very detailed, and from the get go. So right now we're gonna go into now you're convicted, and you're sentenced to federal custody. You are then moved to a prison where you're gonna serve your sentence. Tell us about that first day in that area where now you're gonna be doing time. What's the condition of the cell? Uh, what are you thinking? Especially when the door came shut and the officers walked away. And once you settle in, what was your thoughts?
Once I was like convicted, you mean?
Yes. Now you're doing the serve. Now you're going to be serving time. You're
Well,
sent.
here's the thing. I spent my first 8 months in the shoe. To go from like freedom and no, and then to go to the shoe where there's no communication and just start taking in that environment where like I had no communication with my family. I had, I knew nothing. I was about prison life. I think that was the hardest, first 8 months that I've done. A lot of things happen, there's stuff going on, with my family, with the case and stuff. And basically it's like you're in a prison, right? Mentally, you're just,
Mhm.
it's hard. But I spent my first 8 months in the shoe, and then I spent another 6 weeks. Believe it or not, I spent 6 weeks in the safe house.
Mhm.
As part of the program.
Yeah.
I'm
Jay,
not gonna go
you
into details there. Just out of
no, yeah,
respect.
don't go into that. Remember we were talking and you said that you go in the cell and the cell is dirty, it's filthy, and you look at this thing and you're like, wow, what the heck is this? And remember you were telling me you spent almost a whole day spit shine in that cell.
Yeah, but you see, I didn't know. Like, I would say the first days, I sat there literally, me and my brother just freezing cold. Okay, shaking. Like I remember, I couldn't think of anything else but how cold it was. All right. I didn't know that you could write cop outs and ask for stuff and all this. I had no idea. And they kept us in a part of the shoe where no one was allowed to talk to us. Now they could shout out, but most of the times they were shouting out. They were not nice things. And I was not like my mentor was not to focus on that. So it took me a long time. But once, I want to say maybe 2 weeks of basically depression or 3 weeks. They put someone not in the cell in front of us, but they put someone who was a Mexican guy from Milwaukee in a kitty corner cell. And he yelled out to us. And he was like, hey, whatever, however he called us. I remember looking out the window and we could barely see each other, right? Because he's on an angle. And he said, oh man, you guys are going to the cheese factory. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, the cheese factory. He said, you guys are some rats, huh? And I'm like I didn't care about it, but I'm like, how do you know? I didn't care, He's like, well, look, your names, you don't have IDs on your, on top of your cell. And then he's like, man, this is my 24 year in. And we started talking, and he didn't care, he just started talking to us. And he basically started kind of we started asking him questions, and I'm like, hey, I'm cold. And he's like, write a cop, I'll ask for a blanket, And he started explaining things to us, right? I'm like, man, it's so cool. He's like, when the water comes, ask for, someone to give you 2 cups of hot water, man. You have to you have to drink the hot water. And I was like, oh, okay. And I remember like we would not touch anything because it was 50. He's like, filthy, because he was like, look, man, you have to clean up your cell. You have to clean up. Who knows who was in there? And he basically, I remember, started telling you, like, hold on, soap. He like, ask for soap, right? And he actually showed us the ropes of how to actually, kind of survive. I'm so thankful for him for sure. And we basically, my brother and I end up like, I remember it being so cold, but we literally like lathered up the whole, with shampoo that they give us, it lathered up the whole cell, the bunks, everything. And basically it took us like, probably 2.5 hours, who knows, but we were happy to have something to do, right? Because our mind wasn't even functioning because we were so like, I guess maybe depressed and so into those moments that we were not even thinking about stuff like that. I think we lost, like, we probably were not eating anything. The only thing we probably would eat is that in the morning they give you these like, pastries or whatever and fruit.
Mhm.
And I still couldn't trust like the food. I had this like bad thoughts in my mind about the food. So it was hard, they didn't let us go to commissary. We didn't shower probably for the first 5 weeks. We didn't get a shower. And I again, me thinking about bird baths in there while it's freezing cold, and getting water off a toilet wasn't even a thought, uh but when you're cold like that and there's literally icicles, I remember in the room, I wasn't even thinking about if I smelled or not. But whenever we sit down and come out to talk to the government or something like that, then I'd be like, holy, like I stink. Because we didn't have the basics, we didn't have like deodorant and stuff like that. It was right around the holidays, so like no one was trying to hear us. They're short of staff. The prosecutor, everyone was like busy with the case. I mean, it was certainly a process. So going through that, once we actually like got to a prison, because I spent a few times in different prisons. But once I once the halfway house, we did some time in Dodge County. It's in Wisconsin as well, and that was like I want to say that was like a resort compared to some of the places I've been in. It was a county jail. And then once I got to the institution that we were actually, going to, I thought it was like unreal, like it was a hotel basically,
Mhm.
because there's people walking around. It was a different environment, and my brother and I got to be Sally's. So just even having food or the basics, it was like a totally different experience.
Hey Jay, at what point did you and your brother get separated?
We got separated maybe 10 months after once we were writing my first uh unit, our first prison.
Hmm.
Maybe 9-10 months in.
Okay. So now, Jay, we've got to talk about your new cellmate, your new cellie. Now, let me tell you. You see him coming. You see him being escorted to your cell. Did you recognize him?
Hold
What were
on.
your thoughts? What were your thoughts when you saw him?
Hey Benny, let
Yeah.
me ask you a question. Am I frozen?
No, we
No,
could see you.
no,
You're
I
right.
see.
You know why? Because I'm frozen I'm seeing myself in another laptop, and I'm frozen.
No,
Yeah,
you're you're
We
fine.
we could see you perfectly.
Yeah, we can see you.
So okay, so I guess where we're getting at, the story we're getting at, that was like a few years later. I got bounced around a few times, and
Mhm.
and this is gonna be a place that I'm actually gonna stay for a long time. And so every time they moved me, it was like a big process, right? It was a big process for them to move me with the marshals and stuff. And we were one of those special cases where we had a big security detail, and we would travel in bulletproof cars and private jets, and stuff like that. So um um and in this particular time, I remember getting to a unit, and they're like, they assigned me a cell, and I remember walking in, and it was there was no one there. And I remember like seeing the CO, I'm like, whose room is this? Like, oh, it's empty. It's there's no one there. And I was like, oh wow, this is great. I'm thinking, I'm locked up, and I'm gonna be on my own. So being out there, a couple hours later, I remember being in the cell, cleaning it up, and you just go through your basic routines, right? Once you arrive somewhere, right away it's like you clean up, the cell, you make sure you scrub it down and stuff like that. And the door opened up, you know, and I looked, and when it opened up, I looked, and I saw that it was, it was a Hispanic. And then he looked at me, and then as soon as I saw him, we kind of like really caught eyes. I'm like, oh shit, I know him. But my first thought wasn't, oh, I know exactly who you are. But I'm like, I know him. And then I'm like, I told him in Spanish, like I said, oiga, ¿de dónde lo conozco? And he like, ah, cabrón. He told me, no te conozco. And then I'm like, oh, okay, like kind of rude. So I'm like, all right, well, what's up? He's like, this is my cell. And I'm like, no, this is my cell. He's like, nah, I'm like, well, they put me here, whatever the kids. He's like, oh, maybe, we got to be together, but I got to, like I got the bottom bunk. I got seniority here. And I'm like, all right, that's fine, because he has seniority. He was coming from like a medical writ or whatever the case is. And I was like, all right. But once I started talking to him, I'm like, oh my God, I know who this is, right? And then, maybe, a couple minutes into talking to him, I'm like, oiga, usted es Javier, ¿verdad? Arellano. And he looked at me, his eyes kind of got like wide, and I knew it was him. And he didn't say yes, he just looked at me and kind of like with this surprise, and that maybe that no one ever had said anything to him, but it was Javier Arellano. Javier Francisco Arellano El Tigrillo. Yeah. And so I really think it was just, I didn't say nothing about myself. I think he was happy that I spoke Spanish, but again, he probably, he'd been in prison for quite a while, so he didn't care like who I was or who I wasn't. He was just like, okay. But it's gonna be the beginning of a long friendship with him for sure. I ended up doing a little bit more than 10 years with him, and he was my cellie for a year and a half.
So, Jay, at what point did he know who you were, knowing that you were the enemy? You guys are the enemy.
I know it's gonna be strange for someone, for a lot of people. We didn't talk about that. I never told them, hey, this is who I am. I never said, like, I'm, this drug trafficker. I just played out loud like it was me. But I know that people will go tell him and say things about me, because there's a lot of people that knew of me, being in prison. And he'd ask me a lot of time that why would like people like gravitate towards me, or like what, like how come, all these people, like where, like where the hell they come from? How do you know them? And I'm like, oh man, just, how it is from the street or whatever the case is, I would say. But sometimes we'll start talking. He will start kind of like, we would see these. I think at that time we were seeing like Pablo Escobar la novela or something together, like in the nighttime. We watch Pablo Escobar or stories like that, and he'll like recount a story or say something, and then sometimes like I'll speak about a story, just in general. And I remember this one time I mentioned that I knew this certain individual, and he was like, he stood quiet, and he like, how you know him, And I was like, oh, I know him because, I met him when, I met him in Mexico. And he was like, ah, chingado. Like, he didn't believe me, And I think he was still under the impression that, people like, the government puts informants, in cells with you. So I think that's all he was thinking about. He would never like, we were just kind of like, he wouldn't really, we wouldn't have that many like in-depth conversations. But it took a while. I want to say it took maybe 3 or 4 years of us being together and him actually, getting to know me, and just maybe other conversations. So for him to actually realize that, we were like who I was. But he never kind of like, at times later on, I'd be like, I'll ask him sometimes, like, so imagine we would have met in other circumstances, right? And then he would tell me, we would have never met. So he would say something like that, So yeah, it was and then eventually we would talk about certain like little like stories and stuff like that. Um, he has quite a he has quite a life of his own, and um, yeah, it grew to being really really like uh, I want to say like maybe
You establish a bond while
yeah,
you
a
guys were
bond, a
together.
connection, a friendship.
Yeah.
I remember, I think my person, I want to say like it's weird because there was times I used to think like, wow, I can't get away from this life, huh? Because I was around some other big, uh, drug traffickers and mob bosses and stuff like that. But with him, it was more of a bond, and I think because he's in federal prison, a lot of times it's like the language barrier, the culture, especially, right? Um, I feel like I was kind of there to kind of help him out, and yeah, we developed a deep bond, um, um, and I remember, when it was time for me to go, he shared some tears, I shared some tears as well. It's just like we spent a lot of time together, and I remember he telling me that he like, look, man, I never got to live this long with my own brothers, and look at all the time we did together, I really, thank you for your friendship and for the person that you are, and I'm gonna miss you, man. So, yeah, it's just one of those situations where it's like, um, you're in there with someone, and basically, whenever we had family issues, we were there to like lean on each other and stuff like that. Because at the end, I think that's the hardest thing about prison. That, um, even though we're men, at the end of the day, it's like we look for that, shoulder to cry on, or look for some type of relationship with someone when you're because loneliness is, I think, the hardest obstacle.
Yeah. Hey Jay,
AJ, AJ, one of the factors that you both did not know at the time, but now you probably do, is Steve Duncan. Excuse me. Steve Duncan knew him very well and would actually speak with him during that time.
You know
And
what?
you didn't know him. And then when you got out, and now you and Steve are very good friends.
A great
And
point. A great
it's,
point, Dave.
yeah, go
Um,
ahead.
hello to Steve Duncan. Later on, when he
Yeah,
watches this
he's,
video,
he's watching. No doubt he's watching.
he's watching now,
A
and
legend, a law
yeah,
enforcement legend, Steve Duncan.
yeah, Steve Duncan, and I know his partner and all the crew that did, worked that case. So because I was a translator, I was his translator, right?
Uh-huh.
And stuff like that, and I was the one that would help him, like, if it was a call, to people who've been in prison, be like, oh, that's easy. To someone who's never been there, especially from a different culture, right? It's learning the stuff. So I basically would be that person and be like, oh, you're gonna make a legal card here, like help him out, translate, from
Mhm.
him to the BOP, whatever the case was, right? Um, so it's funny because Steve Duncan, I had heard so much about him, and it's people would think, oh yeah, what do these criminals talk about? But no,
Mhm.
it was like he would be like, man, Steve Duncan, he said he was someone who dedicated his life to hunting us, right?
Really? He mentioned Steve Duncan to you?
Yeah, all the time. He'd be like, he was,
Wow, that's
and,
interesting,
and
man.
there's a difference. And I want to like, I will say this: there's a big difference, between law enforcement officers that go just, do their job, and there's Steve Duncans, right? The
Yeah.
Steve Duncans who are gonna sleep, eat, are gonna give their whole life to it, and really put everything into it, right? And it makes a difference, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm speaking about Steve in general. But I know it's a whole, group of individuals, but I'm sure you guys know exactly what I mean, and where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
But uh, it was weird to like later on, meet him, and I was like, where do I know him from? Like, where do I know this name from? And here we are on the other side, and it's just ironic, and how things end up working out, and that he was so involved, like in that organization, and being a big part of of arresting all of them, right? And the
Yeah.
brothers and everything, all the work he did. And then for me, to be, in prison with him for so many years and hearing so many different stories. So it's like sometimes I would hear stories,
Mhm.
sometimes he would be like, no, well, they did this or they did that. And then later on, I'm able to talk to Steve about it. And it's just like, it's amazing,
It is. It's amazing, man. But you know what? It's men like Steve Duncan, who's a legend, that he's a legend in law enforcement. But you know what? He always treated people with respect. Even when he was a probation officer, I knew him back then when he worked with juvenile hall. I'll tell you, he always treated people with respect. But it's great to hear a story like yours right now, where even somebody that he hunted all his life and was part of the arrest team, still talking about Steve with respect. That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what? I think it's, I'm not sure. I'm just gonna guess. I shouldn't assume, right? But for the most part, it could be strange. But I never like it was never nothing. It was like what I believe is there's two sides of it. When for criminals, if an officer's doing their job, they're doing their job. It's a, like it's
Nothing
a
personal,
it's,
business.
it's business. And I've said this. I'm not sure it was just this past week that I said, look, you guys go out to do your job. Criminals go try to get away with it. All the criminals know exactly, that it's basically you guys are the ones that have, that authority, and that we're just trying to get, by, right? We're trying to get lucky. And for sure he saw it that way, and without a doubt, it was never like any hate, or anything like that. I think for those criminals, I'm already talking about them. Like I'm talking like I'm you guys. No, but I think it's just it depends. I think for him and other people, like we know what we're doing. We know what we're up against, and I don't think anyone ever took it, any other way or. So yeah.
Hey, Benny, go ahead. Go question number 8.
Well, you pretty much answered it. I mean, we're talking about release date, the process, and when you were escorted out of cell, you had that farewell with Javier. I mean, you see, guys shed a tear. I mean, you guys worked together for a long time. I mean, you were pretty much brothers while you guys were in there. You guys share personal stories and heartaches, and probably share laughs and cries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? And for me, don't forget, I was separated from my twin brother who I was with, before I was even born, right? So that was always hard for me, like my best friend, was my brother and my wife, and being separated from them, my family. You kind of look to try to, kind of have that family kind of like, like somebody to kind of be in their place.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why, you have a lot of gang problems also in prison, right? Because you look for, how gangs are supposed to operate or stuff like that. And I think for me, I think it was always of a, being honest and being a real friend, to anyone around me. And it's easy. I believe it's real easy for me to be able to make friends because I do believe in the person that I am, right? If that makes sense. I'm gonna be respectful to everyone. I'm gonna be kind. I'm a believer in Christ. I feel like I treat everybody with the respect and kindness, no matter how they are. And sometimes if you're meeting, you could be a jerk to me. I'm gonna be even nicer to you. And so I think it's very easy for me to make friends and have people gravitate to me and create those relationships and friendships. He was not
Jay,
the only one I left behind. I left some really good, people behind that, are just looking for the opportunity, to have that chance and, restart their life again.
Jay, you said that he told you when you guys left, that you were more brother to him than his brothers.
Yeah. And I, when I say that, I don't say to take away nothing from his brothers, right? But he explained, like, look, I was a kid growing up. I didn't get to, convivir like with his brothers that long because they were all, already couples on the run and, stuff like that. But I think that he felt maybe, or, what brothers were supposed to be like, right? Because sometimes he wasn't always, he was a little bit bad temper and stuff like that. So there was times that he would you know, I would be the one that calm him down about certain stuff, and always like he kind of like I feel like I was able to mentor him about reality, if that makes any sense, because here's someone who's lived a life of a capo and his whole family, right? And all he knew was basically la escuela de ellos, right? Like their school, like, and everything
Yeah.
they did. And then you're actually like a civilian or a prisoner even, right? Just like everyone else. And in America, especially in the United States, in the prisons, and no one cares that who you are. All that BS about, oh, you're a drug lord in Mexico, that doesn't carry no weight in American prisons. You better earn that respect. You better give it to, um so yeah, I think you combine all that, and I guess makes for a very interesting story, right?
Hey, Jay, before we get to the last question by Sean, Chris Kilby had a question earlier today, and maybe you could share it. We're going to go back just with this question. Was there a detective or special agent or deputy district attorney or AUSA that influenced your ultimate decision? Was there anybody that influenced it?
No, absolutely
Did
not.
he turn himself in? No?
No, absolutely not. Look, there was agents. I mean, I would say there was agent on my case. All due respect to them, there was a lot. We had quite a few Steve Duncans. I will tell you. They were not all Steve Duncans, but they were Steve Duncans. But yeah, I think I'm gonna speak for my brother and I. For my brother and I, it was always to stay. I didn't want to stay one step ahead. I wanted to stay 10 step ahead.
Mhm.
And that was my goal. I did not like overthink, who was behind the badge or who was behind those signatures. I had a job to do. I respected the job they had to do. I was indicted, in 2004, early 2004. Um, I looked at it like, okay, what's next in my life, because that's the life I was like living. But influence, no, I didn't have no interactions of that kind for me to be influenced by them. Um, so no, I remember once we started cooperating. I remember like once we reached out to the government and we were cooperating. I did have a few hard times with a few of the agents, and maybe even one of the prosecutors where he was going to threaten me about about how much time I could spend in prison. I'm like I remember like thinking like, sir, I called you. What are you talking about?
Mhm.
Like, trust me, I know, I know the process.
Hey, Jay, how many years did you spend behind bars and how many years were you on parole?
I spent 12 years, solid 12 years. I turned
That
myself
included parole or that included just
just prison.
incarcerated?
I turned myself in November of 2008, and I was released in November 2020. Um, and then 5 years supervised release. So I'm on the last end of my supervised release, but it should be terminated pretty soon. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's been a process, right?
Yeah.
It's been a process. I think this whole situation. I always like. I think in my case, especially, there should be a lot of law enforcement officers that feel like I shouldn't be given a second chance, and then I have this belief that if law enforcement officers take the oath as well, right, to obey by the law and and enforce the law, it should work both ways. That for someone who's already cooperated, because let's not take that's part of my sentence, right? Let's be honest, like
Yeah.
that was part of my sentence, the work I put in, before I even stepped foot into a prison. And now that I've served my time, I do believe that um in my mind I feel like that's the past. I felt like the only thing that I have left from that is memories, right? Um of that person that I used to be. But like I'm a believer in Christ, like I said, and I feel like in second chance and redemption. I believe that I'm here for a purpose, but it's not always easy. Even in the eyes of those who are supposed to uphold the law, that I'm still looked at, or still could be looked at as a criminal or drug trafficker, and even once I've done all my time, right?
Hey, Jay, and that segues into our
That's
last
great.
question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Big Sean.
So, Jay, tell us who Jay Flores is today, and what made you want to train law enforcement officers, and what's your view on law enforcement today?
Well, yeah, I'll emphasize on what I just said. Jay Flores is, I believe, I'm a smarter, more mature version of the person I used to be. I'm closer to Christ. But I feel like inside I've always been this person, and I know sometimes it doesn't sit well. What I learned from the age of 7 was the business of drug trafficking, and that's what I did. But that didn't define me. I trafficked drugs. The drugs didn't make me, or the life didn't make me. And that person, that Jay Flores, is the same person that decided to, come home, and I feel like in looking for Christ for, what was the next step, I feel like I had this calling, and you know to give back. And to me, my personal, like my own personal, like who I am is always like, well, how could I give back? And it means everything to me to be able to turn something negative into something positive, right? And I do believe that's only comes through Christ. That I could take all this bad, knowledge and use it for something good. And that has, kind of given me new, aspirations and goals and dreams, and I feel like I'm comfortable because it's something that I know. It's something I would, it's been in my life. And just having all that, being on, spending a lot of time in prison, I used to think, wow, I should go back and go to school and be a doctor, or get a career in something. And I felt like the Bible kind of gave me this idea of how testimonies are always used, right? And we basically look to the Bible as a to kind of guide us through life, right? For those who are Christians, and those stories are told by people just like me, who like kind of walked or lived a life that um wasn't a good one, and then changed it, and then we lived through those stories, and we lived through the God's word in those stories through those men. And I felt like that really called to me, and I was like, wow, I could do this. But it always was like, well, could I give something back? And there's two sides, right? There's the side of me drug trafficking, and then there's the side I work with the government for over 11 years, right? Cooperating and investigations, all that. So I feel like there's a good amount of education that I've received, and I have knowledge to be able to share. And if I did, I wouldn't be doing this. In terms of what my beliefs of law enforcement, again, if we could go back, my life is out there since the age of 7, 8. I've been vetted, where they went back to my kindergarten school, class. I've always had respect for law enforcement, and I always had respect for everyone. So I never changed, like my belief system or how I looked at law enforcement. I still, you know, what I see today is that I get it now. I get why I was able to be a successful drug trafficker. It's because a lot of times it's a lot of the mindset, and there's a lot of the the training or basically uh beliefs that are being passed on from one generation to the other, that kind of allowed someone like me to be successful. And I think that that's what I'm trying to change, maybe the mindset of law enforcement, and how they view or what they think about people like me, or or some of their stance on certain situations that could stop them from basically doing their job, or succeeding in their job. But for the most part, I feel like working with law enforcement, because I worked side by side with the government for many years. Um, So like even today, I do get a lot of, sometimes I do get a lot of pushback. I could feel it. I could, I could hear those, those conversations behind my back, or, those, the, sometimes to my face. It's not always right. But I welcome it. I feel like it's okay. What matters to me is that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm sharing this information. I hope that I could make it be useful, and hopefully provide some change. And I can't change everyone's mind. Not everyone's gonna like me or appreciate me, or agree with my past, because I don't agree with my past, right? Today, but I certainly, for the once I go to my trainer, I go to conferences. For the most part, look, I get a lot of handshakes, I get a lot of hugs, I get a lot of standing ovations. That means everything to me. I've been applauded for wrong, for bad, and to have that, to have law enforcement officers say thanks, this was great. That means everything to me. I feel like it gave me this like high, right, of feeling good and inside, and finally be able to do something good with my life. And
Hey, Jay, we have Wrong to Strong JC with us. God bless you, JC. And JC was also from Chicago, and you've told us your story with him. And JC today, I see him on Facebook, and I see him on Twitter. He's dedicated his life to serving, going into the barrios there in Chicago, Colorado, Arizona, and talking to the convicts, talking to the gangsters, drug addicts about the Lord. And I believe that he also goes to different churches and teaches and speaks to them. Is that something right now you're dedicating a lot of your life going to law enforcement conferences? But is that something that you are also going to follow under the path of JC, who's watching the show right now, a brother in Christ, that you will go to churches and to, I know you go to schools and talk to people about the Lord, but is something that in the future you will join JC in that group and going to the schools, barrios, prisons to talk to people about the Lord, and also churches?
Oh wow! Well, big shouts out to JC. Me and JC, he's a good
Yes.
friend of mine. He's introduced me to some great people, and through these connections, even we've kind of came to know each other, Dave, right?
Yes,
Through
yeah,
that.
to Pastor
Yeah,
John, right?
Dan Humphreys and so
Yeah.
many others, and we are currently actually in the process of. Again, I will say this. Look, I started this off not knowing where I was going to lead me to,
Yeah.
and I've learned, like JC has, he's worked hard, and he works very hard to give, share his, testimony to
Yes.
schools, to, wherever he could do it. He puts all this public servant work, he dedicates his life, his time, his whole days into,
Wow.
giving back. Um, and we had talked about how we were going to actually work together and what we could do together. And here I am on the other side, right?
Uh-huh.
And I feel like we all do different things, right? If
Mhm.
in law enforcement, somebody might be a probation officer, somebody might be a FBI agent, terrorist, DA, right? There's different fields, right? For every, but it doesn't change the fact that you're law enforcement. Correct, right? We're in agreement there. And I do believe that finally right now we're actually talking, we're kind of seeing where we're actually going to be able to collaborate and do more things like that. I started off on the law enforcement training center because I feel like that's where I could be more of use.
Mhm.
And now I'm getting into more like corrections right now as well. Like just like JC has a program where he's a Wrong to Strong, and he uses his testimony, his life, in a special program to help inmates and youth organization. Now I'm using basically my life as a deterrent, where I'm basically right now reaching out to different juvenile detention centers,
Mhm.
youth organizations, prisons, believe it or not, prisons, and where I share my testimony and my life as a deterrence, or as a way to kind of say, look, if I came from that world, you know, and I was able to, be at the upper echelons of the drug trade and sit down with, work with people like Miles Zambada and Chapo Guzman, and then later on be able to walk the halls of Congress or do conferences with law enforcement. I mean, that kind of shows that at any time you could really, change your life. It doesn't have to be as a, cooperator. It doesn't have to be as a, instructor. It could be in any way you feel like you could put your life to use for good. If it's for Christ, if it's for your family, like JC, right? And everything he does. And I will say, like, it's coming together. It's, and I hope that we're going to be able to work together and basically share our testimony. He's from Chicago. We have, he was part of my life before, and to see him do everything that he's doing, it's amazing. And I'm blessings to him and his family. I always tell him, like, he's a little bit, his muscles do a lot of the talking. But I think it kind of goes hand in hand. Like, here I am, here I am, here he is, and I think it's a great example of, like, it could be anybody,
Exactly. God could change anybody. Yeah.
And he's doing amazing work. And I will tell you, I see him today. I see John Humphreys, and again, Steve Duncan. You guys are putting in work. You guys are giving back to your whatever your cause, whatever's dear to your heart. If it's your law enforcement officer, your buddy, your that community, you guys share these stories and offer all these different, commentary and stuff like that to kind of bring awareness, to educate, to, be in line with the community and anyone else who's listening. It's the same way, right? For kids and youth organization. And I know that for, like, JC, it means a lot because he's had a hard, traumatic life, and to be able to share his testimony, hopefully, give someone hope. That alone, I think, if, Dave, for what you do, I think we all play a part, right? Today, kind of doing that. That's the ultimate feeling, right?
Yeah.
When you come back and you're able to speak to a young, like I'm able to speak to a teenager. I mentor kids, not kids, but young adults in prison. And when you see that change, or you see that you're actually planting the right seeds, right? And it's a different feeling. No money in the world, could ever replace those feelings.
Exactly.
Like, and I did this, with my background, I know that, some of the constant questions I always get is something about money, but I will tell you, there's nothing more fulfilling to me than to doing right and helping others in any way. And I think you guys all could relate, especially JC. So shouts out to him and everyone who's on the chat, who's tuning in. I seen that Robert Arce was on as well.
Yeah, Bobby. Yeah.
Hello to him. And I think it's just the beginning. I want to be busy. I want to be busy doing good. And I will tell you guys, I have this. It's weird because no excuses. It's a struggle. I want to make it clear. It's a struggle for me to reach out to juvenile centers, and I don't always get the happy reception. And it's weird because I'm not sure. Like, sometimes I look at, like, again, we're different backgrounds, different ways of getting there, but it's all everyone just wanting help, right? And just offering that help. So I'm looking forward to it. I think this is the beginning. I'm happy. I know that Ron Strong is going to join me in the gang conference in Arizona in August. And I have an upcoming class there too as well. So I'm looking forward to spending some time with him. We're going to actually do some stuff with him and John Humphreys and visit some centers.
Hey, once again, Jay, thank you very much, my brother, for being with us, sharing your life story. It was a big blessing. I don't know what happened to the camera. It looks like your camera on your end all of a sudden went out. But brother,
it's telling me that, I don't know what it's telling me. It's telling me that.
We could hear you. We could hear you.
It wasn't detecting my face. So
your face. Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm glad that you have it set up like that. But brother, de veras, de todo corazón, hey, gracias. And thank you for everything that you're doing for law enforcement, everything you're doing for the Lord. And God is really using you in so many ways, especially going to the schools, going to the juvenile hall centers. It's a blessing, brother. De veras. Mil gracias. Benny, any last words for Jay?
Just there's still so much to talk. Jay and I talk a lot, and there's just so much. I'm going to try to bring Jay back again. Maybe not in this kind of forum, but maybe like a one-on-one type of thing. So and do specific items. We're going to talk about specific things, So that we can spend a lot of time on that topic, because there's just so much information. I just want to, and Jay, thank you, man. Thank you for being there for us, man.
You know what? I want to tell you, like, you don't have. I want to say something, like, from the bottom of my heart. I say this every chance I get. And thank you, Dave and Sean and
Benny.
No, I know Benny.
Chalo.
Yeah,
Chalo.
And for everyone who's opened the doors, so Steve Duncan, the Robert Arce, like, John Humphreys, for all those retired, and officers and those who've still been, do training and still in the force that have opened, up the doors for me. Man, Dave, you've done so much. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will tell you, as I sit here, I think it's important. It's important for me to share some of the, like, my backstory.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way I can move forward, right? I don't, like, to me, this is part of my life. I think, if there's an audience, it could be one of wow, I get it. But to me, it's always about looking ahead and the journey ahead. I've gotten a little bit more comfortable in sharing some of this stuff just because, I believe that I'm supposed to do this. This is God's plan. But it's you guys that have that, mindset that, it's not even about judging. It's about opportunity. It's about letting, giving me the chance. And that means everything to me. And for all those, like, in the chat, like Mr. Gold, whoever I don't know, and I appreciate everyone, and blessings to you and all those people that send me blessings and, different channels. I know that means a lot to me. Again, I don't have to do this. And Benny, Dave, you guys know how hard I try.
Yes, I know. Yes.
There's a whole different side where, a lot of people don't know that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not, I don't complain, I'm actually motivated. It motivates me a little bit more to do it. And anytime I could, share, or we could kind of sit down and do something, where it's, to bring more awareness or any type of knowledge, I'm sign me up. I'm here, and if there's anything I could do, I'm here, count me in. And thank you for all those people who tune in and watch the videos, and for, I'm sure I'm going to meet many of the community that actually sometime, somewhere in the future. So I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciate everyone.
All right, thank you. God bless you, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
Gracias.
Bless you, Jay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Wow, very, very insightful interview. Jay always talks from the heart. He's a man that is a man of prayer, a man that loves God, and God is going to use him in a mighty way. May God continue blessing him. Benny, tell us about our guests next week.
Well, next week we got Norm Welch. Norm was a police officer for 26 years, but his life took a bad turn. I mean, he took a life of destructive. It was a destructive spiral with major medical complications, causing his addiction to opiates. Norm's life took him on a downward spiral. He attempted suicide, made some poor decisions that led to a 14-year prison sentence. Norm's going to share with us his addiction and recovery. It's going to be a captivating interview. Norm's a very specific, he's a specific person, man. The other guy's something else. What do you want to watch and listen to Norm? And he's going to share with us his experience. It's going to be awesome, especially for first responders and military personnel who suffer from PTSD. I mean, David, you know him a lot better. I mean, you talk to him a lot more. Yeah.
I'll tell you, Norm is Ruben Palomares on steroids. I mean, well, no, I think Ruben Palomares is Norm on steroids, vice versa. But I'm telling you, Norm was a commander with B&E. He was a lieutenant with, I believe, one of the major smaller police departments in Northern California. And then he went rogue. He went rogue and he got arrested. I mean, he literally went rogue. But I'm telling you, he is a man of God today. But his story, and I think that his episode, one of the things that he mentioned that he wants it to be called the slippery slope. How police officers could be the best, but yet they could go rogue and they could go and commit crimes. He got arrested, did 14 years, Benny, right? He did 14 years.
Yeah.
And he's going to tell his whole life story. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful podcast. And he also wrote a book that I highly recommend. When I was doing a lot of counseling, even today, I do a lot of counseling, people suffering from PTSD. I either buy him his book or I tell them, buy this book. It is one of the best books on PTSD. Ours, the
music stops.
When the music stops, it tells you stories and a little bit about how to solve your problems. His book, it's all about how to solve, how to get healing from PTSD. So, man, Benny, I am looking so much forward. And he's also writing another book called, I believe, Why Do Good People Suffer? He's writing that book, and I think it's going to be out the next couple of weeks. I cannot wait to hear that book, or read that book. He writes very well. Man, I'm excited about his upcoming class. But guys, before I forget, tomorrow we got part 2. Today, it's funny, we had part 2 on Jay's outstanding interview. Tomorrow we have part 2 on Victor Avila. He was a special agent with ICE. Tomorrow, Sean, I think tomorrow, well, we're going to have a special episode. We're going to invite you because he is going to talk about tomorrow about how his department, ICE, turned on him and how his PTSD, not only from the shooting, but from his supervisors, affected his life. I mean, I just finished reading this book. I'm telling you, I picked it up and I read it within 8 hours. It is an outstanding book. Tomorrow, he's going to get into the nitty-gritty lies that his supervisor said, how the department basically destroyed him. And once again, it's by the grace of God that he's alive today, by the grace of God. But tomorrow on Ash Wednesday at 5 o'clock, have your cigar. If you smoke cigars, have your drink ready. Watch the show. It's part 2. You can watch it live. So we'll see you tomorrow night. With that said, Benny, anything else on Norm? I think I covered the majority because I know him.
Well, you know, our book is our stories, our experience.
Yes, stories. Yes.
And Norm's book is a solution.
That's right. That's a perfect way to explain it.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Perfect way to explain it.
And
yes.
everybody just, you know, we're getting closer and closer to that witchy moment, the elections. Things are going to happen. Us as law enforcement, you have to be ready. I mean, I'm retired already, so I don't have to get ready. But I still remember all the preparations our department used to do for major events. I mean, they take it very serious. So train, be ready. It's going to be, I hope it's not wild, but I think it's going to be wild. But just be ready, be prepared. Just remember 2020. This might be 2020 on steroids.
Okay. Yeah, most definitely, without a doubt. John, last words?
Exactly what Benny said. You know, start training. If you're in law enforcement, active law enforcement right now, start training for it. Get that mindset, and you know, think outside of the box. You know, when you think everything's going right, something's going to happen. Murphy's law, right there. Just follow Murphy's law.
Sean
it can't go
Murphy's
wrong.
law.
Well, not Sean Murphy's law.
I know,
but it did apply a lot of times, man. I swear. I hate that term. But anyways, but and just be safe. Just be safe.
Yeah. Guys, I always end with have a purpose-driven life, live every day. But today I'm going to change it. I'm going to say trust the process and trust the author. And whomever you believe is the author, trust it. My author is Jesus Christ. Whomever your author is, but trust the process. We talked about elections. Trust the process and trust the author. And with that said, we will see you tomorrow night on Ash Wednesday, 5 o'clock. Please do not miss next Tuesday. I'm telling you, it's going to be an outstanding episode, just like tomorrow night is. With that said, God bless you. Trust the process. Trust the author.
Money.